Welcome to PRAJNA SPARKS, a podcast where we listen to a Dharma teaching, contemplate with our minds and in our hearts, and engage in guided meditation. In this episode, we explore life, death, and beyond. Life. What is it exactly? How do you think of life? How would you define your life? Often we think of our life as just what happens between being born and dying. From a Buddhist perspective, the various experiences we have seen through the filter of the karma that is active is called life. How do we spend our life? In what ways do we devote our time, our energy, our love to various things in life? In what ways do we resist or deny or challenge different experiences in life? These questions are all valuable from the perspective of Buddhist spiritual practice for many reasons. From the perspective of understanding our experience with the sacred creativity of a mind that is nimble enough not to fall into the trap of seeing things dualistically, limiting our experience to easily labeled, compartmentalized descriptions that fail to capture the full vivacity of our experience moment to moment. When we take that perspective, we start to open up a broader perspective on how we see life, birth, death, and beyond. Our mind starts to become more expansive, more flexible, more gentle, less brittle, tense, and narrow. For example, we often do think of life as that time between being born and dying. Buddhism would say, yes, that is the span of time in which we experience the various appearances of this life. That view is kind of like living in a ravine between two very jagged rock outcroppings, where we have a view of a small bit of stream from one rocky piece to another, and we call that little piece the stream. Is it the stream? Yeah, sure. But it's not all of the stream. The stream meanders its way to our little spot on the bank of the stream from some place upstream and continues downstream. And yet we fixate on that little bit of stream between our rock outcroppings of birth and death and say, this is life, my one life. What's more, from the perspective of the misperception that believes in a truly existent self, and thus also characterizes everything else as other, we develop very strong attachments that reify myself, others, this life, and all the things that we think will give us pleasure or pain in this life. The things that lead to profit and loss, success and failure, happiness and sadness, etc. We want all those things that sound so good, and we want to avoid those things that don't. If you think about it, we spend an incredible amount of time, energy, and attention chasing down the pleasurable side of experience and escaping the unpleasurable side as much as possible. None of us has complete control over any of this. This means that we end up in a tangled web hoping for goodness, fearing that we won't get it, hoping to avoid unpleasantness, fearing that we will get it. And that hope and fear becomes even more reified, even more concretized, so that we become so attached to those pleasurable seeming things that we hope for, and very averse to those unpleasant seeming things that we fear. We can spend our entire life chasing down the things to which we're attached and running away from the things to which we're averse. Is that a life? Is that the life you want for yourself? Most beings want a life of well-being, happiness, ease, contentment, joy, meaning, purpose. In Tibetan Buddhist practice, we turn to death and a meditation on death that is very intricate and detailed as a way of elucidating the ways that we are limiting our life, making it small, keeping us in this race away from unpleasantness and towards pleasantness. How does that work? There isn't anybody out there, I'm sure, who thinks they're immortal. All of us know that we are certain to die, but our culture is not one that reveres a recollection of death as a valuable state of mind. It seems morbid, depressing, even fearsome. By contrast, Tibetan Buddhist practice actively inculcates a consistent recollection of death to bring to life the gratitude that we certainly have, but may not tap into so frequently with respect to the plenitude that we enjoy in this life. It starts out by expanding our view of life beyond birth, beyond death, beyond that narrow little view between our two rock outcroppings, welcoming a span of life upstream and down, and recognizing that these two make up who we are now and what we will be in future. From that perspective, birth and death are less static points, a beginning and an end. Rather, they are highlights, points of difference along the way that mark off a span in the stream, a bend in the river that has particular similarities in the currents that run between them. This more expanded perspective allows us to open up to the mystery of things we may not know through our senses or through reasoning, but we can intuit, we can experience, and we can touch into. All of this becomes possible when we start to contemplate death in this broad perspective. The contemplation itself involves experientially delving into things that normally we're hesitant to look at even intellectually. So this is a kind of analysis that's not just abstract. We're allowing our heart, our experience to lead the way, rather than staying at a remove, using pure abstraction to keep us from the felt sense of the experience. Particularly when we're talking about death and mortality and other very emotional contemplations, there's a strong tendency to veer away from them. They're unpleasant. They're scary. Our culture doesn't really have a container for us to hold these experiences with trust and confidence. We'd like to offer you the opportunity to do that, first by listening to the explanation of how we can connect with the reality of our own life's impermanence in a way that's nourishing, of creativity, gratitude, vibrancy, meaning, and purpose. First of all, it's certain that we will die. This seems like a platitude, but Do you feel like you live out of the knowledge of your certain death? If you knew you had a month to live, would that change how you behave on a day-to-day basis for that month? This contemplation is aimed at bringing alive in our heart a vivid experience that understands death is certain. There's never been any being who has ever escaped death, no matter how strong, how beautiful, how wealthy, how powerful. Nobody escapes death. Why is that? From the Tibetan Buddhist perspective, death is simply the label we apply to that moment when body and mind separate. The body is a material, conditioned phenomenon. It's made up of various different composite things, and its survival is conditioned on many different things coming together to keep it alive, and many other things, contrary to survival, being avoided. At some point or another, however, the body will reach an endpoint. It will necessarily die. What's more, the span of time in which that body is alive, active, and vibrant is consumed from moment to moment. Each moment, we are farther from birth, closer to death. These are heady things. Ironically, though, the certainty of death actually brings great perspective to our life. It helps us to clarify our priorities. At this stage, it also helps us to see the various things that we get entangled in as rather petty. Our little arguments, our resentments, and so forth take on a different cast. We might even have a different mindset about them and seek to address them in a way that we wouldn't otherwise. In addition to the certainty of death, there's also the uncertainty as to when it will happen. However certain we may be that we will die, nobody knows for sure when that death will come. The time of death is not definite. Our lifespans are uncertain. The body itself doesn't have a vital essence that can be measured and charted. There's no expiration date to it. And in addition, there are many possible causes of death: illness, accident, an attack, while the causes for survival are relatively fewer. Indeed, even some of the things that we need for survival can become fatal. Many illnesses take their origin in the food that is usually a cause for our survival, and so forth. So in addition to the certainty that we'll die, there is this uncertainty as to when that will happen. In addition to these two, there's also the fact that the things that we think of as my life, this body, our friends, our family, our home, our possessions, our wealth, our enjoyments, none of them will accompany us. None of them is able to prevent our death. Listening to all of this can feel uncomfortable. It can make us squirm. This kind of fear, however, is considered a wholesome fear in Buddhist practice. Why is it wholesome? First of all, it accords with the true state of things. Nobody can dispute the fact that we are certain to die, that the time of our death is uncertain, and that the various things of this life will not accompany us past death. In addition to it being true, however, this fear is wholesome to the extent that it prompts us to engage in our life in a way that's more fulfilling, more meaningful. Simply thinking about this and becoming afraid because we're so attached to this life. We think of the things of this life as real, and the prospect of being separated from them as terrifying. That's not a wholesome fear. That's a fear born of attachment that only breeds more fear, or maybe diving deeper into the habits of attachment and aversion. What makes the apprehension wholesome is not fearing death per se. There's no point in fearing death. Fearing death is not going to prevent death from happening or change its timing or enable you to choose a few things to take with you. What makes these contemplations ones that engender a wholesome fear, a wholesome apprehension, is it turns our mind to thinking, well, what can I do that I'm not doing? Not only to prepare for that moment of death, but to live my life until then with less attachment, less aversion, less apathy, and more engagement. Appreciating the things of this life not as ends in themselves, but as treasured and valuable things that are slipping through our fingers, that we have the opportunity to enjoy for a time, and that can serve as a support for our practice of Dharma, for expanding our mindset, and for engaging in all the various activities of being a good person: kindness, generosity, patience, diligence in our meditation practice, being ethical, not only avoiding things that are harmful, disserving ourselves and others, but actively going out of our way to counteract harm, not just not killing, protecting life. If we see a spider or a worm in our path, moving it out of the way so that we or someone else doesn't step on them. Not just not stealing, but actively giving of the excess of wealth that we enjoy, and so forth. To the extent that these contemplations fuel a more expansive, more meaningful, more engaged approach to life, they make our life here and now rich, rewarding, enjoyable. They make the moment of our death, which can be extremely painful, not only physically, but the mental agony of being parted from all these things that we're so intensely attached to: our bodies, our families, our loved ones, our home, our pets, our possessions, automobiles. When the contemplations of death actually allow us to hold these lightly, reverently, joyfully, the time of death is not one riddled with such agony. Going beyond that limited view of life as that little bit of stream between the two rock outcroppings, we can cast our gaze downstream. What happens after death, when this consciousness parts from the body, like a guest from an inn on its way to the next destination? Here too, the contemplation of death allows the mind stream to be light, flexible, supple, not readily confused, moving into this space after death and beyond with ease, sweetness, joy, meaning and purpose, just like we lived our life. When we consider life and death, main things to think about are how narrow or wide is our perspective? How tight or loose is our grip on attachment and aversion? How entangled are we in this web of hoping for this and fearing that, back and forth, back and forth? Or how light are we? How free of being entwined? Also, we might consider that there really is not much to fear in death. From the perspective of the Buddha's teachings, death is a label we give to a particular point in the continuum. Not unlike the label sleep. At night, when the experiences of our day are fading, that moment when the experiences fade and the consciousness drifts towards dream is called sleep. We label it sleep. When the experiences of dream arise, we label those dream. When those fade and the experiences of the next day arise, if we're lucky, we call that waking. It's a single continuum, changing from moment to moment, but we label those individual moments with reference to the different experiences that go with them. This process is quite similar from the perspective of the Buddha's teachings to what happens at death. The experiences of this life start to fade. as we slip into the moment of death. As those experiences fade away and the experience of, in Tibetan, the bardo, the intermediate state, arise, we label that the bardo, the intermediate or liminal state between death and rebirth. As those bardo appearances fade and the experiences of the next life begin to dawn, we label that rebirth. One continuum. Different labels along the way based on the various different experiences that go with them. Embracing all that you are, all that this mind stream can be, beyond the limitations of dualistic thinking that limits you to this tiny space between the rock outcroppings, between birth and death, keeps you from fulfilling a richer meaning and purpose. The contemplation of death can awaken us to a more lithe, more beautiful way to be as we live, sleep, dream, awaken, die, and are reborn. As PRAJNA SPARKS continues into its new incarnation, our contemplation sequences are going to be more directed on you, the listener. Tanya's questions in the previous episodes always have a huge fan base. People love to hear questions they didn't even know they had expressed in her joyful voice. Now's the opportunity for you to dig deep with your questions. We'll be dropping episodes on the full and new moons and taking questions at sparks@prajnafire.com. Our aspiration is to make PRAJNA Sparks more interactive and co-create a community with you. We hope you'll enjoy this new format and give us feedback. We'll start you off with a few things that you might want to consider as you go about your day. Think about, discuss with others, maybe journal, and of course, write us with any questions at sparks@prajnafire.com. To what extent is your life spent in pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain in any of the various ways that those appear? To what extent do you feel you have an extremely strong, even fixated attachment to your body or your home, your loved ones, your pets, your possessions, your status, your recognition, your standing in the community? If all of that disappeared tomorrow, how would that feel? Importantly, also consider what's uncomfortable for you in these teachings on life and death, past and future existence. What feels frightening, judgmental? This has been Yeshe for PRAJNA Sparks. Next, Lama Zopa will lead a guided meditation. Shivnee is our Tibetan singing bowl artist. Thank you for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review to help us reach new listeners. If you have any questions, email us at sparks@prajnafire.com. Check the episode notes for more resources. Visit us on the web at prajnafire.com or follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at PRAJNA Sparks. May all beings benefit.
Hello, friends, and welcome to this meditation for the episode on life and death. Before we move into the meditation, it's just a couple of quick words that I like to say. When we're working with these meditations, which are usually referred to in the traditional texts as meditations that turn the mind towards Dharma, there can also often be a sense of sorrow which comes up. This sorrow isn't the point of the meditation, but it does have a very important function that it serves. And for this reason, we often refer to it as a wholesome sorrow. It is a sorrow that helps us open our eyes, that shows us a little bit more of how to live life skillfully, how we can bring our aims of happiness and all the actions that we take into accord. So that being said, this meditation may move us through that place of wholesome sorrow. In that regard, I just want to emphasize how important it is that you take care of yourself. You alone know the aspects of your own mind, of how you're feeling, of how much you can manage and how much you can deal with. I just encourage you to take care of yourself. Be your own witness and do so with gentleness, without judgment. Okay, that being said, let's just begin by taking our seats. However you're engaging with this meditation, just really come into your posture in the moment, into your embodiment. Feel the earth beneath you, the heavens above, and how this moment, this experience belongs to you. It is the manifestation of you right now, right here. Allow yourself to feel present, to come and settle into belonging in this moment. Really seizing the opportunity that this meditation is. And in that place of settled belonging, taking your spot on earth, simply begin by cultivating still, alert awareness through shamatha meditation or tranquility meditation. We can do this simply by focusing on the inhalation and exhalation of our breath. You don't have to change it or modify it in any way. Just become aware. Let it be the anchor for your breath. Let the breath be the anchor for your awareness, so that you know any time that you start to waver away from that clear, alert, still state of mind that doesn't follow after nor reject any of the thoughts that might occur to it. We don't have to chase after them. Just stay with the stillness. Stay with that clear focus. Let that be the point of your attention. So let's practice like that for just a minute. And then we can move into the meditative inquiry, simply by turning our attention to the fact that it is certain that this life will end. Allow yourself to sit in this recognition of your own impending death. I will certainly die. Don't push away any feelings, nor try to cultivate something that we think we're supposed to feel. This is just an exploration. There's nothing that we need to feel, and nothing that we can't handle in what we feel. Just let yourself sit with the experience of your own mortality, and also with the fact that death could strike at any time. It could come in 20 years. It could come tomorrow. It could come before we go to sleep tonight. It could come before we draw our next breath. There is no guarantee. So just let yourself start to feel into this experiential fact that we are going to die. Anytime you catch your awareness wandering away from the meditation, or settling into a comfortable kind of dull, hazy state that doesn't really know, simply tighten your focus back on the object of inquiry. What is it going to be like when I am facing my death and there is no hope of escape? When I'm lying on my deathbed, with all of the familiar aspects of this life slipping away, all the possessions I've accumulated for my security and comfort, all my loved ones with whom I have spent so much time trying to get our relationships just right, even this body that I coddle and dote upon, trying to ensure its every comfort. With all of these vanishing, and all of these are stripped away by death, just like wakening from a vivid dream, what then will be of use? Sitting in that moment, what will have been meaningful? What will have been a good use of my time? This in turn points us back to life. What an amazing opportunity we have right now, where we have the interest and the capacity to explore death, to explore the significance that death and what comes after gives life, to cultivate those qualities of mind, stillness, focus, gentleness, precise knowing, benevolence, compassion, and so forth. All those qualities that we can see in the moment experientially benefit us here and now, and we can also grow into and develop and witness their usefulness going forward. Spend a few moments in this wider perspective on life that the contemplation of our death begins to open. Thank you so much for your practice and for all that you do. Now please gather any positivity that's come of this contemplation of death and of life, and share it freely with all beings who are just like us, who want happiness and want to be free of suffering. Thank you.